Hey, this is Ramon, Channel Alpha 4, and I'm going to call this one Misunderstanding Race and Culture, or maybe just confusing the two. So, I'm going to give you guys three last names of three of my friends, and I want you to tell me which last name was born here in America, and their parents born in America, and their parents' parents born here in America, and then tell me which of the other two last names came from Mexico. All right. This is going to sound like it's an easy challenge, right? Okay, well, let's see. McLean, Rodriguez, Watson. Which one of those families is from Texas? And which of those families are from Mexico? If you guessed either McLean or Watson as not being the immigrant name, you are incorrect. Rodriguez is the family that was born here in Texas, whose parents and grandparents were born here in Texas, and whose parents before that were actually north of the valley where I live. So, what? Okay, so let's explain this a little easier for you. Everything that is Mexico now, not just the states that were once part of Mexico that are now part of America, but the actual body of Mexico proper. Parts of it were settled by Irish, Scottish, and German immigrants. I want to say that again in case you misunderstood me. Mexico proper, as we understand Mexico now, parts of that land, while it was still part of Spain, and later on while it was part of Mexico, were colonized or settled by German, Scottish, and Irish settlers. Where I live now, my neighboring city is Edinburgh. Edinburgh. Okay, we say Edinburgh because we're jerks, but it's Edinburgh. Okay, I live in McAllen. Seeing a sound here? Yeah, they're not Mexican names, but these places are all Hispanic population and named by Hispanic people. So what's that about? Well, okay. Ready for this one? Sit down if you're not ready for it. Hispanic is a culture, not a race. I know. You've heard that before. But you're going to see fearmongers out there trying to say that it's a race thing. It's not. What about the Hispanic culture? Is the Hispanic culture Catholic? Well, I'm Catholic, but not all Hispanics are Catholic. In fact, there are some that are Baptist, Protestant, Buddhist, whatever. Just like America, Mexico is not a developing country, no matter what assholes on the internet want to say. Mexico is a fully developed nation. Here's the deal, though. So what about darker skinned Hispanics? And I know that right now my skin tone's kind of gone down. But darker skinned Hispanics, where does that come from? Well, they're part of a native population. Okay? It's a bad word in Spanish, but it's called mestizo. And they're half Hispanic, meaning from Spain, and or whatever, sometimes even just half German or whatever, and half Native American. Okay? So the Native American part, the indigenous population, is where they get their dark skin color. But here's another thing. So the natives are tall. For instance, my mother's side of the family are all 6 foot tall and higher, and have no body hair, and very dark skinned. But the Spaniard side are all short, and they have a lot of peach fuzz, okay, which becomes dark hair once you mix the bloodlines, the heritages, okay. So, for instance, back in high school, there was a beautiful girl that immigrated from Mexico City. She was a Mexican national, and she had blonde hair, blue eyes, and pale skin. And her name was Jenny, and more than a few guys that I know was all trying to get a date with her because she was very beautiful. Not because of the complexion, but because she herself was very beautiful and she had a great personality. And she was funny. So it was a triple threat right there. Anyway, she had a heavy, heavy Hispanic accent. She went to a Catholic church. All the things you think of. But again, natural blonde hair, natural blue eyes, and pale, pale skin. In fact, my skin, if you've seen any of my other videos, I usually look dark. That's only from running and getting a tan. My natural color, because of my father, is super pale. His father, on the other hand, had mestizo blood. So his father was dark, but his father's parents, one was light-skinned, and then my grandmother was also light-skinned. In fact, she's half Spaniard and half French. And on my mother's side, there's also half Spaniard, half French, and then also Native American, and, well, just Native American, because that line. My great-grandmother onward is just Native American on my mother's side. You don't need to know that. Got distracted. Anyway, so what's the point? The point is that you cannot just tell someone's Hispanic just by looking at them. In fact, here's where it gets even more complicated. So let's say you're like me, a U.S. citizen who was born here, who has an ancestry that goes back to Native American, or whose ancestry goes back to Mexico or Spain, back when these areas were part of Mexico or Spain, or France if you live in Louisiana, and you didn't move when the revolution happened, and you just stayed here. Let me ask you a question. What do you think it says on our birth certificates? It says white. It says white. No, for real, it does. In fact, me and a friend of mine have arguments all the time, and he tries to say, even though he's much more Hispanic looking than I am, he tries to say that he's probably German. Now, he's not. He has a Hispanic last name. He has a darker complexion than me. But we like to make the joke. Why? Because it says white. And on other, depending on your state, sometimes it even says Caucasian. Which is not the case if you're a racist and you're listening to this, right? But it is the case. The only thing that makes Hispanics Hispanics, outside of the language and outside of having some ancestry to Spain, blood ancestry that is culture. In fact, there are people who live in the area that I live in, which has 1 million Hispanics on one side and 1 million Mexicanos on the other side, a population of 2 million, is that even white people who come from up north, their kids, while living down here, and this will sound horrifying to some of you racist people, think of themselves as Hispanic. And when they go back up, and I would hear this story all the time, I heard it in college, heard it in high school, heard it in junior high, when they'd go back up to visit their relatives, they felt weird, like outsiders, because they were looking for other Hispanic people. Even though they themselves didn't look like this, because they grew up here and because this is what they know, they wanted tortillas in the morning, they wanted beans, they wanted rice, they wanted to barbecue, they were Texan and very Hispanic in culture. Although their parents were from, Iowa, Idaho, New York, Wisconsin, they'd come down here, have kids down here, and they'd work in the maquiladoras, but their kids would, go to school on the north side of town, like where I went to school. Yet they would identify as Hispanic, because Hispanic is a culture. And a lot of times when new people come down to this area, you'll usually go out and we'll do the traditional Hispanic stuff. And it's not what you think. First, it's a football game. And by football, I don't mean soccer. I mean football. Like we go to a local high school football game because this is Texas. Then we go get some barbecue. Then we'll get them a drink, usually tequila or a thing called a Mexican flag, which is 3 liquors, 1 green, 1 white, 1 red. And forgot the Mexican flag for a second. And then we'll give them a shot, and we'll give them a big sombrero. And yes, I'm saying that we give the white guy a big sombrero, and we'll give them usually a poncho, and we'll take them to the football game, to the local high school football game, and we'll have fun like that. And we'll get them to do something, stupid, like either dance to a Mexican song or say some BS Mexican saying that's not even a real saying. And then we'll honor them by saying something dumb like, well, now you're an honorary Mexican. Okay? We don't say Hispanic, we'll say Mexican down here because we're right on the border. Obviously, they're not an honorary Mexican. They're an honorary Hispanic, and obviously they're still an American citizen. But then we embrace them as our own. That is the culture of Hispanic. So, just letting you guys know that's what that is. So, hope that clears up some of the misunderstanding about Hispanic culture versus race. Peace.